When I first met Sarah, her family didn't give me the time of day. It was only after I made something of myself financially that their tune changed. And then they had the audacity to try and get rid of the prenup. But I had a plan, a single move that shut them down completely, leaving them speechless and powerless. I was 23 when Sarah walked into my life. Fresh out of college and starting my first real job at an IT company in Denver, I wasn't exactly rolling in dough. Sarah was finishing up her teaching degree. We met at a barbecue thrown by a mutual friend. She just had this natural ability to make everyone feel at ease and laugh along with her. To be honest, I was smitten from the get-go. Sarah came from a privileged background. Her father owned a couple of car dealerships and her mother ran a boutique over in Boulder. They weren't obscenely wealthy, but they certainly had enough money to smooth out life's rough edges. My family, on the other hand, was firmly planted in the middle class. My dad worked as an electrician, my mom was a nurse, and they brought up me and my two brothers in a modest but comfortable home. We never went hungry, but things like vacations or trendy clothes were luxuries we couldn't afford. Despite our different backgrounds, Sarah and I connected instantly. We started dating, and within a year, I knew she was the one. I proposed in that park where we used to spend lazy Sunday afternoons, and she said yes. Everything felt perfect. Well, almost. Her parents, especially her dad, weren't exactly thrilled about me from the start. They subtly made it clear they didn't think I was worthy of Sarah. It wasn't outright rudeness, more like carefully chosen words that reminded me of my place in the pecking order. Comments like, "So, Matt, where do you see yourself in 5 years?" Or, Sarah's accustomed to a certain standard of living. I tried to ignore it because I was head over heels for Sarah and she always had my back. Then came the wedding plans and her parents dropped the prenup bombshell. I distinctly remember Sarah's dad calling me into his office one evening after dinner. He had this serious look on his face, like he was about to impart some profound wisdom. Instead, he slid a thick document across the desk and said, "This is just a formality, Matt. It's to safeguard Sarah's future. I'm sure you understand." I didn't understand, and frankly, I didn't appreciate it. I felt deeply insulted. What made them think I was after their daughter's money? I was barely scraping by on $40,000 a year, but I had ambitions, big ones. I was determined to prove myself, not just to them, but to Sarah and, most importantly, to myself. Still, I didn't want to stir up trouble. So, I took the papers home and went through them, wrestling with a mix of anger and confusion. The prenup essentially stated that if Sarah and I ever divorced, I'd walk away with only what I had earned myself. None of her family's wealth, none of the assets she might inherit, nothing. It was all about protecting her, not about building a life together. I resented every single clause. I brought it up with Sarah, hoping she'd side with me. Instead, she said, "Matt, it's not a big deal. It's just a piece of paper. It doesn't change how I feel about you." She was calm, but I could sense she was torn between me and her family. I didn't want to put her in that position, so I swallowed my pride and signed the damn thing. I tried to convince myself it didn't matter because I wasn't marrying her for her family's money. Looking back, that was probably my first major mistake, letting her parents dictate the terms of our marriage from the outset. But at the time, I thought I was doing the right thing, taking the high road. I told myself they'd eventually warm up to me and the prenup would become irrelevant as we built our life together from the ground up. The wedding itself was a beautiful affair, but there was an underlying tension. My family and hers just didn't mesh. It was palpable. The day of the wedding, my side of the family, including my brothers and some cousins, showed up in suits they'd clearly hunted down on sale racks or borrowed from someone who owed them a favor. Sarah's family, on the other hand, looked like they'd just stepped out of a high-end catalog, perfectly pressed and coordinated. There wasn't any loud disagreement, but the social divide was undeniable. After the wedding, Sarah and I settled into a small apartment in Denver. She found a teaching job at a local elementary school and I continued my IT job. Those first few years tested us, but they were good years. We watched every penny, cooked almost all our meals at home, and tried to save as much as possible. Sarah's parents occasionally made pointed comments about our budget or lack thereof, but I tried to ignore them. We were happy. Still, the prenup hung over me. It wasn't that I thought we'd ever need it, but it was a constant reminder that her family didn't fully trust me even after I married their daughter and was building a life with her. Every time her dad made a sarcastic comment about my career or our financial standing, it stung. It actually pushed me to work harder to prove him wrong. But that prenup, it never really disappeared. There were moments, little casual remarks, when it would surface. Her mom would joke about how clever they were to have me sign it, or her dad would bring it up during discussions about estate planning. They'd say it with smiles, but it always felt like a backhanded jab. I just kept my mouth shut and focused on my work. I loved Sarah and I wasn't going to let her parents ruin what we had. I figured as long as we were happy, their doubts and comments didn't really matter. But now, looking back years later, I realized that prenup was much more than a simple legal document. It was a constant reminder that her family thought I wasn't good enough, and as things began to shift in our lives, that piece of paper became the centerpiece of a storm I never anticipated. After a few years of slogging away at my IT job, things started to change, but it wasn't an overnight transformation. It was more like a series of small wins that gradually added up to something significant. I was 27 when I finally caught my first real break, but the journey getting there wasn't exactly smooth. Back then, I was still working at that same IT firm in Denver. The salary was okay, enough to get by, but it wasn't anything to write home about. After 4 years with the company, I felt like I'd plateaued. The work was stable, but it wasn't challenging, and there were very few opportunities to advance. I knew I needed to take a risk if I wanted to make any real progress. One of my coworkers, Jason, had started talking about this side hustle he was doing, freelance coding for startups. At first, I was skeptical. I thought he was going to burn out trying to juggle 2 jobs. But then he showed me his paycheck from 1 month of freelance work, and I was floored. He was making twice as much as we were at our full-time jobs. That got me thinking. I'd always been decent at web development and enjoyed problem solving. I started using my weekends to brush up on coding languages, learn new frameworks, and experiment with side projects. Sarah thought I was nuts, spending so much time on it. "You're already working full-time," she would say. "Why are you taking on more work?" But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was a real opportunity. After about 6 months of freelancing on the side, I landed a client that changed everything. It was a small tech startup looking for someone to build their entire back-end system. The pay was more than I'd ever earned on a single project, but they also offered stock options as part of the deal. I wasn't sure if the stock options were worth anything at the time, but something about the company's vision resonated with me, so I took the gamble. For the next year, I worked like a machine. I was still putting in 40 hours a week at my day job, but I spent every spare moment working on the startup project, weekends, late nights, everything. Sarah wasn't thrilled about it. She tried to be supportive, but I could tell she was frustrated that I wasn't as present as I used to be. We had arguments, mostly small ones, about me missing dinners or being glued to my laptop when we were supposed to be having movie nights. I'd always say, "Just a little longer, I promise," but I don't think either of us really believed it. Then it happened, the kind of thing you read about in business journals but never expect to experience yourself. The startup where I'd been grinding away, often burning the midnight oil, was acquired by a behemoth. Suddenly, the stock options I'd almost forgotten about exploded in value. Just like that, I went from juggling bills and stressing over the mortgage to having enough to clear everything out and still have a decent safety net. I'll never forget telling Sarah. Her reaction was, well, shock mixed with disbelief. She was happy, no doubt, but I could see a part of her was waiting for the other shoe to drop. It was a real turning point. The following week, I handed in my notice at the IT job, something I'd been fantasizing about for years. My boss was not pleased. He laid on the guilt pretty thick, trying to make me feel bad about leaving. "Matt, you're a key player here. Are you sure you want to just throw that away?" But I was done. I had a different trajectory in mind now. The first thing I did after clearing out my desk was book a surprise trip to Hawaii for Sarah. It was a trip we talked about taking for ages, but it was always just out of reach financially. This was my way of showing her that the sacrifices had been worth it, that I hadn't forgotten our dreams in the chaos. It was everything you'd expect: stunning beaches, incredible sunsets, and food that made your taste buds sing. But even amidst all that beauty, my mind was racing with possibilities, with what I wanted to build next. I realized I was hooked on the idea of working for myself. The freedom, the challenge, the feeling of being in control, it was addictive. It was in Hawaii, sipping a Mai Tai, that I decided I was going to start my own company. I used the money from the acquisition to launch a property management business. Real estate had always been an interest of mine. Plus, it seemed like a relatively stable way to build wealth without being chained to a cubicle for the rest of my life. Starting the company was definitely a baptism by fire. There were a million things I didn't know, from navigating legal paperwork to figuring out how to manage employees effectively, but I threw myself into it with the same energy I'd poured into my freelance work. I devoured books, went to workshops, and relied heavily on a mentor I'd met back during my freelancing days. Slowly but surely, things started to make sense. By the time I turned 30, life was looking up in ways I couldn't have imagined a few years earlier. The property management business was thriving, exceeding all my initial expectations. Our client list was growing steadily and I had managed to assemble a solid team that handled most of the day-to-day stuff. For the first time, I wasn't just scraping by or living paycheck to paycheck. I was comfortable. I was proud of how far I'd come, and I even started to think I might have finally earned some respect from Sarah's family. But the respect I craved wasn't exactly what I got. It started subtly. Sarah's dad, Tom, began calling and asking for my input on investment opportunities. It seemed harmless enough. "Hey, Matt," he'd say. "I've been looking at buying some commercial property downtown. What are your thoughts?" At first, I was glad to help. I assumed he finally saw me as someone who had proven himself, and I appreciated that he was acknowledging my expertise. But then the questions became more pointed, more personal. "Do you think you could invest with me?" "Just to help get things moving," Tom asked during one of our calls. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to be supportive, to be a good son-in-law. But the deal he was pitching sounded too risky for my liking. So I politely told him that I wasn't in a position to invest at that time. That was the first time I noticed a definite shift in Tom's demeanor towards me. He didn't say anything explicitly, but there was a palpable coolness the next time we were together. Sarah noticed it too and asked if something was wrong. I downplayed it, saying, "Nah, he's probably just stressed out about business." But deep down, I knew he wasn't thrilled with my answer. Diane, Sarah's mom, definitely had a knack for making things uncomfortable. She'd casually drop hints about the rising cost of everything, always mentioning how much harder it was for them to maintain their lifestyle now that Tom was slowing down at work. "We're not spring chickens anymore, Matt," she'd say, that sweet smile plastered on her face. "You and Sarah are so fortunate to have such a solid financial base." Fortunate? That word rubbed me the wrong way. Luck had damn little to do with where I'd gotten in life. It was years of grinding, sacrificing sleep, and sheer hard work. But I bit my tongue, not wanting to stir the pot. Things took a serious turn that one weekend we went over to her parents' place for dinner. Steak, mashed potatoes, polite chit-chat. The evening started out predictably enough. But then Tom brought up the damn prenup. "Matt," he said as he sawed into his steak, "I've been giving that agreement we had you sign before you and Sarah got married some thought." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. I hadn't even thought about that thing in years. I'd considered it a formality, a hoop we jumped through to appease them. I'd figured it was ancient history. "What about it?" I asked, carefully keeping my voice even. "Well, don't you think it's a little outdated? Look how well you've done. You've built a great life for my daughter, and I respect that. But keeping that document active seems unnecessary now, wouldn't you agree?" I glanced at Sarah. She was suddenly fascinated by her mashed potatoes. Clearly, she knew this was coming. "I don't know, Tom," I said, trying to stay calm. "It hasn't been an issue for us. Why fix something that isn't broken?" That's when Diane chimed in. "It's just that things have changed, Matt. When you two got married, we were trying to ensure Sarah's security. Now that you're so successful, it just feels like the prenup is redundant. Your family now, after all." There it was. That word, family. Their favorite weapon. It was their way of implying I was being unreasonable if I didn't fall in line. I looked at Sarah again, hoping she'd throw me a lifeline, but she stayed silent. That silence was the most irritating thing of all. "Honestly, I don't see the point in getting rid of it," I said finally. "It's not like it's affecting us day to day. It's just a piece of paper collecting dust in a drawer somewhere." Tom's smile tightened and Diane gave Sarah a look that screamed, "Talk some sense into him." But they didn't push it further that night. On the drive home, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Why didn't you say anything back there?" I asked Sarah. She sighed, staring out the window. "Because I don't want to be stuck in the middle, Matt. You know what my parents are like. They just want what's best for me. And what about what's best for us?" I countered, my voice rising. "This is our marriage, not theirs. The prenup hasn't been a problem, so why are they suddenly obsessed with it?" She didn't have an answer, not a real one anyway. Instead, she just said, "Just talk to them, okay? Don't worry about it." Easy for her to say. But I did worry about it. A lot. Over the next few weeks, the pressure didn't ease up. Tom and Diane kept finding ways to bring up the prenup, always cloaking it in the guise of just a conversation. And Sarah? She started getting more and more defensive, saying things like, "You have nothing to lose by canceling it." That's when I felt like I was fighting a two-front war, one against her parents and another, more painful one, against Sarah herself. I loved her, but it was hard not to feel like she wasn't entirely on my side. The last straw came when Diane called me one afternoon while I was at the office. She started with the usual small talk, then abruptly shifted gears back to the prenup. "Matt, I really think you should consider how this looks," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "Keeping that document in place makes it seem like you don't trust Sarah, and that's not fair to her." I'd had enough. With all due respect, Diane, I said, trying to keep my voice level, this isn't your decision to make. Sarah and I are both fine with the current arrangement. There was a pause and then she said something that still makes my blood run cold. Well, if you're so determined to keep it, I guess we'll just have to see how Sarah feels about that in the long run. It wasn't an outright threat, but it sure as hell felt like one. I slammed the phone down, absolutely furious. That night, I broke the news to Sarah, told her exactly what her mom had said. Her reaction was surprisingly flat. No shock, no outrage. Just a simple, they're just worried, Matt. They don't mean any harm. That's when the penny dropped. This wasn't just about the damn prenup, it was about power. Sarah's parents had always called the shots in her life, and now they were trying to extend that reach to me, trying to control my decisions too. Update 2, I guess. Matt here again. I can't tell you how much I appreciate the advice and support I've been getting. It's honestly been a wake-up call. Putting all of this down in writing, reading your experiences, it's given me a clarity I didn't have before. So here's the deal, things have actually gotten worse, not better. The pressure's been dialed up to 11. Sarah keeps bringing up the prenup, hammering on it, and there's a new edge to her voice, a new demand. It's shifted from, let's talk about this, to if you really trusted me, you'd just tear it up. We've had a couple of blow-ups about it, real knockdown, drag-out arguments. The last one went nuclear when I finally just said it. This isn't about trust, Sarah. This is about your parents pulling the strings. She didn't take that well. She fired back, or maybe it's about you not trusting me. What kind of husband keeps something like that hanging over his wife's head after all this time? That stung, I'll admit. I told her the prenup hasn't been an issue for years, so why the sudden obsession? The only thing that's changed is your parents seem to think they won the lottery. She called me paranoid, which is her favorite defense these days. That's when I knew we needed to get away, have a real heart-to-heart without the peanut gallery. I suggested we go to the cabin, that little place we used to love. It's tucked away by the river, quiet and isolated. I thought maybe we could hit reset, actually talk without her parents' opinions looming over us. Sarah agreed, but her lack of enthusiasm was obvious. When we got there, the initial vibe was, okay. The cabin was exactly as I remembered, peaceful, secluded, the perfect place to clear your head. We even cooked dinner together. That first night felt almost normal. But even then you could cut the tension with a knife. The next morning I knew I had to force the issue. We were sitting on the dock, watching the river flow by, and I just came right out with it. Sarah, I need to know what's really going on here. Is this about us, or is this about your parents? She sighed, not even bothering to hide her irritation. Matt, this is about us. My parents don't control me. I'm the one saying the prenup is unnecessary now. I wasn't buying it. Come on, Sarah. Let's not pretend your parents haven't been pushing this from the start. They're the ones who made me sign it in the first place, and now they're the ones trying to get rid of it. That's not a coincidence. She turned to me, her face hard. Do you even hear yourself? You're acting like my parents are the villains here when all they want is what's best for me. Best for you? What about what's best for us? This isn't their marriage, Sarah. It's ours, and I'm not going to let them run the show. That's when she said something that made my blood run cold. Maybe the problem isn't them, Matt. Maybe it's you. Maybe you're so caught up in your own insecurities that you can't see how unfair this is to me. Insecure. I snapped back. You think I'm insecure because I don't want to throw out an agreement your parents insisted on, the same agreement they made me sign because they didn't trust me in the first place? She just shrugged like it was no big deal. Well, if you can't trust me now, maybe we shouldn't even be talking about a future together. That hit me like a punch to the gut, but I wasn't about to let her see it. Wow, so now you're threatening to leave me because I won't cave to your parents' demands. Really mature, Sarah. It's not a threat, Matt, she said, her voice like ice. It's just the truth. If you're so obsessed with this prenup, maybe you don't see me as your partner anymore. Maybe you're just waiting for me to screw up so you can walk away with everything. That was it. That was the final straw. I stood up, looked Sarah right in the eye and said, don't try to make this my fault. I've busted my hump for everything we have, and I've done it entirely on my own without a dime from your parents. If anyone has a right to question loyalty here, it's me. She just kept staring, completely silent, and I turned and walked back to the cabin. Needed to cool down before I said something I'd regret. The rest of that trip was a complete write-off. We barely spoke, and when we did, the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. By the time we were packing up to go home, it was painfully clear we were miles apart. I've got my first therapy appointment coming up this week. I'm hoping it'll give me some direction, help me figure out what the hell to do next. Right now, it feels like I'm walking through a minefield, terrified of setting off an explosion. I love Sarah, I really do, but this whole mess is making me question everything. If anyone's been through something similar, I'd be grateful to hear how you handled it. Thanks for listening and thanks for understanding. Update 2. Well, I wish I had better news to report, but things have only gone downhill. I'm honestly not sure if my marriage can even survive this. It all blew up last Wednesday. I walked in the door after work to find Sarah's entire family parked in my living room, her parents, her sister Amy, even Sarah herself, all waiting for me like some kind of ambush. The instant I stepped inside, Tom launched into me. Matt, he started, we've been talking and it's time to resolve this prenup situation. It's tearing the family apart and we can't keep living like this. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Last I checked, this was about my marriage, not some group therapy session. I looked at Sarah, praying she'd say something, anything, to defuse the situation, but she just sat there, staring at the floor. Look, I said, trying to stay calm. I've made my position clear. The prenup stays. It's non-negotiable. That's when Diane jumped in. Matt, you're being completely unreasonable. Sarah has given her all to this marriage, and you're treating her like she's disposable. Disposable? I asked. I've spent the last 5 years building a life for us while dealing with your constant interference. With all due respect, Diane, this is between Sarah and me. We need to sort this out ourselves. She wouldn't back down. This is our business when it affects the family. If you cared about Sarah, you'd see that keeping this prenup is hurting her. Before I could even respond, Tom said something that made my blood run cold. Or maybe you're not the only one with options here, Matt. Sarah deserves to be protected, and if you can't see that, maybe this marriage isn't as strong as you think. It felt like a thinly veiled threat and I wasn't about to stand for it. Are you seriously suggesting that the survival of my marriage hinges on me tearing up a legal document your family insisted on? You've got some damn nerve, Tom. The room went dead silent. I noticed Amy, Sarah's younger sister, shifting uncomfortably in her seat. She's always seemed like the black sheep of the family, kind of quiet and not as involved in the family drama. I didn't think much of it at the time, but looking back, I should have picked up on something. Eventually, I told everyone to get out. I wasn't going to sit there and be ganged up on in my own house. Sarah stayed behind and we had one of the worst fights we've ever had. She accused me of being stubborn and selfish and I told her I was done being treated like a walking ATM by her and her parents. Things got so out of control that she stormed out and said she was staying at her parents' house for a few days. I didn't try to stop her. The next day I got a call from Amy. I was surprised because we barely talk outside of family get-togethers. She sounded really nervous and asked if we could meet up in person. I agreed, figuring maybe she wanted to apologize for the intervention or offer some kind of explanation. When we met at a coffee shop, Amy looked like she hadn't slept in days. She kept glancing around like she was afraid someone would see her. Finally, she said, Matt, I overheard something the other day and I think you need to know. What she told me completely floored me. Amy's revelation hit me like a physical blow. It turned out Sarah and her parents had been orchestrating something behind my back for months. I hadn't suspected a thing. Amy had overheard their conversation during a family dinner, a time when they assumed she was out of earshot. They were saying the prenup needs to be nullified before Sarah can even consider leaving you, Amy had told me, her voice trembling slightly. They believe it's the only way she can get what she deserves. I couldn't quite grasp the words. Leave me? Why would she want to leave? Amy hesitated, then dropped the bomb. Because she's been seeing someone else. Her parents are fully aware, Matt. That's why they're pushing so hard to get rid of the prenup. They're convinced if she divorces you without it, she won't get anything. The rug was completely pulled out from under me. I asked Amy if she was absolutely certain and she nodded emphatically. I didn't want to believe it either, but I heard everything. They even discussed how to manipulate the situation to make it seem like you're the one at fault. I sat there, stunned, trying to process the information. Amy seemed genuinely distressed and I could tell she wasn't fabricating any of it. Why are you telling me all this? I finally managed to ask. She sighed heavily. Because it's not right, Matt. You don't deserve this kind of treatment. I've always believed you were a decent guy and I can't stand how my family is treating you. I refuse to be complicit in it. I thanked her sincerely for telling me and assured her I wouldn't involve her further. After she left, I remained seated for what felt like an eternity, replaying every moment in my mind, the countless late nights I dedicated to work, the persistent arguments surrounding the prenup, Sarah's increasingly distant attitude. It all suddenly clicked into place. Once I got home that evening, I started meticulously reviewing our shared finances, searching for any inconsistencies. As expected, there were numerous charges that I couldn't account for. Fancy restaurants, expensive hotels, and even purchases from a couple of high-end jewelry stores. I haven't confronted Sarah yet, but I've been diligently gathering evidence, documenting everything. I immediately contacted my lawyer and recounted everything Amy had told me. He advised me to remain calm and avoid making any impulsive decisions, which is considerably easier said than done. At this point, I'm trying to formulate my next course of action. This situation feels like a profound betrayal, one that I never anticipated. I'm uncertain about what the future holds, but one thing is definite: the prenup isn't going anywhere, and neither is my sense of self-worth. If anyone has experienced anything similar and has advice on how to navigate this, I'm eager to hear it. Thank you for lending me an ear and sticking with me through this. Update 3. Hey everyone, it's Matt again, hopefully for the last time regarding this particular drama. This entire ordeal has been an absolute roller coaster, but I've finally emerged on the other side, and I can honestly say it feels incredible to reclaim my life. After receiving the information from Amy, who, by the way, is the unsung hero in all of this, I moved swiftly to get my affairs in order. My lawyer and I worked in perfect synchronization. The evidence I'd collected, her infidelity, the suspicious financial transactions, and even her parents' involvement made the divorce proceedings surprisingly straightforward. When I finally confronted Sarah with the evidence, she didn't even attempt to deny it. Instead, she resorted to tears, played the victim, and offered every excuse imaginable. I felt incredibly lonely while you were constantly working, she sobbed. You seemed to care more about your job than you did about me. I wasn't buying it for a second. I bluntly told her, honey, you don't get to shift the blame onto me for your choices. I was working tirelessly to provide us with a life that most people only dream of, and you carelessly threw it all away. Initially, she tried to argue and justify her actions. Well, maybe if you had paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have felt the need to look elsewhere. That one stung, I won't lie, but I refused to let it show. I simply responded, so you didn't have to do anything. You made a conscious decision, and now you have to accept the consequences. The expression on her face when I informed her that I had already filed for divorce was truly priceless. She feigned shock as if she couldn't believe that I would actually go through with it. Then she suddenly changed her tactics, desperately begging me to reconsider. We can fix this, Matt. We can work through this. Please. Counseling? A fresh start? It was all just noise to me. I told her flatly, there's no fixing this, Sarah. The foundation was gone. Her actions had screamed louder than any words could ever whisper. Then there was the prenup, that beautiful, life-saving document. I owed her parents a strange debt of gratitude, in a way. Their insistence on that ironclad agreement when we got married meant Sarah walked away with absolutely nothing. Not a dime of the money I'd bled for, no alimony, no division of assets. Nothing. And the infidelity just cemented everything. Her parents went ballistic, of course. Diane, her mother, left a string of enraged voicemails ranting about how I was ruining Sarah's life and how I should be the bigger person. Unbelievable, right? I ignored them. My lawyer advised documenting everything, just in case they decided to get litigious, but thankfully they backed down pretty quickly once they realized they had no real leverage. It wasn't long before I discovered the true motivation behind their desperation to nullify the prenup. Tom and Diane weren't nearly as financially secure as they projected. Their business ventures had been hemorrhaging money for years. They were barely afloat. The fancy lifestyle they loved to flaunt was all a carefully constructed illusion. When Sarah moved back in with them, the cracks in their perfect facade became impossible to ignore. She went from our beautiful home to her childhood bedroom. The designer clothes, the spa days, the expensive dinners, all gone. From what Amy told me, they're struggling to keep up the charade, but it's only a matter of time before their whole house of cards collapses. And then there was her lover, the guy she thought she was running off with. He ghosted her the moment the situation started to crumble. Amy said he was a classic player with absolutely no interest in settling down. He was just using Sarah, and once he realized she no longer had access to my money, he vanished. So, there she was, jobless, broke, and stuck with her parents, who were in no position to help her like they once had. Karma, right? I thought that was the end of it, but of course, Sarah couldn't let it go. A few weeks after the divorce was finalized, she showed up at my office unannounced. My assistant tried to stop her, but Sarah barged right past. She looked terrible. Hair disheveled, wearing old, rumpled clothes, and with this desperate, pleading look in her eyes. Matt, she said, tears running down her face, I made a mistake. Please, I need you to forgive me. I leaned back in my chair, just staring at her for what felt like a long moment. A small part of me wanted to laugh at the sheer audacity of it all, but mostly I just felt numb, completely drained. Sarah, we've been over this. You didn't just make a mistake. You made a series of choices that destroyed our marriage. Forgiveness doesn't magically fix that. She pulled out all the stops. The apologies, the blaming her parents, the promises to change, even a few pathetic hints about wanting to get back together. We can start over, Matt. I'll do anything to make it right. But there was no chance I was going back. Sarah, you didn't just cheat on me. You were actively planning to leave me while trying to take everything I'd worked for. That's not love, and it's definitely not something I can ever forgive. When she realized I wasn't going to budge, the anger surfaced. You're going to regret this, Matt. You're going to end up alone, and you'll realize you pushed away the one person who really cared about you. I just shook my head. Sarah, you didn't care about me. You cared about the lifestyle I provided. Now you're going to have to figure things out on your own. I called security to escort her out, and that was the last time I saw her. Since then, things have been peaceful. Amy and I still talk occasionally. She apologized again for her family's behavior, but she really didn't need to. She was the only one who had the decency to do the right thing, and I'll always be grateful for that. Regarding Sarah and her family, word's gotten back to me, secondhand, mind you, that their financial situation is deteriorating. I can't deny a sliver of sympathy for Amy. She's caught right in the crossfire, and that's a tough spot to be in. But honestly, as for Sarah and her parents, they built this mess themselves, and now they have to deal with the consequences. This whole situation has really hammered home the crucial lesson of self-reliance. I've seen firsthand how quickly people will try to exploit you, twist your arm, or lay on the guilt trip to get what they want. Ultimately, you're the only one truly responsible for protecting your own interests. So, to anyone out there battling difficult in-laws, a partner you can't trust, or just a nagging feeling that something's off, listen to that inner voice and fight for what you believe in. Believe me, it's a tough road, but the peace of mind and self-respect you gain are absolutely worth the struggle. I learned that the hard way.